Everyone told Olu his dreams were impossible. Born into poverty, with no way to go to school, his future seemed set. But one day a stranger appeared, offering a message that would change everything. What happens when a boy with nothing dares to dream of flying? And how far will he go to turn the impossible into reality? Once upon a time, in a small village, far away from the noise of the city, lived a boy named Olu. His life wasn't like that of the other children. Every morning he sat quietly on a wooden bench outside their little mud house, watching as his friends walked past, heading to school, laughing with excitement. But Olu wasn't one of them. His heart was heavy, weighed down by a sadness he couldn't shake. His parents were poor, too poor to send him to school. The little money they earned from their farm barely fed the family. Olu's father, strong and hard-working, carried the weight of their struggles on his face and hands, worn down by years of toil. It was all written in the deep lines of his tired eyes. One day, Olu asked his father, "Papa, why can't I go to school like the others?" His father's reply was tender, but laced with pain. "One day, my son, one day," he said. But Olu knew deep down that day might never come. Every morning, instead of heading to school, Olu would walk beside his father to the farm. The work was hard, backbreaking, under the sun, but Olu never complained. Yet, whenever a plane flew overhead, something inside him stirred. The roar of the engines in the sky felt like a distant voice calling him, telling him he was meant for more than just the farm, more than just the village. One morning, as they walked, a plane flew by again, its shiny body glimmering in the light. Olu stopped, staring up at it, his heart pounding with something powerful. "Papa," he whispered, eyes fixed on the plane, "one day, I will be up there. I will be a pilot." His father's hand rested on his shoulder, heavy with love and sorrow. "I hope so, my son," he said, though the weight of their reality hung in his words. But Olu didn't care. He had already decided he would not give up, no matter what. The farm was quiet that morning, the field stretching out as far as the eye could see. As they worked, the heat grew unbearable, sweat rolling down Olu's face, his hands aching. But with every plane that soared across the sky, hope grew within him. He knew the world was bigger than this farm, bigger than their village. There was space for him in the sky. But the harsh truth weighed heavily on him. They were poor. Too poor to afford books, uniforms, or school fees. His father's silence on the matter spoke volumes. One day, as they worked in the field, Olu couldn't keep the weight of his dream inside any longer. He stopped, leaning on his shovel, his voice trembling with emotion. "Papa, do you think I can really be a pilot? Do you think I'll ever go to school?" His father's eyes were full of sorrow. He didn't know what to say, for he didn't want to crush his son's dreams, but reality was cruel. "Still," he whispered, "I don't know, Olu, but if anyone can make their dreams come true, it's you." Olu's chest tightened with emotion. His father believed in him, even when life made it hard to believe in himself. That day, Olu made a promise to himself. He wouldn't give up, no matter how impossible his dreams seemed. One morning, as they worked, a man appeared on the road. He was different, dressed in fine clothes, looking out of place in the village. He walked toward them, smiling kindly. "I saw you looking at the plane earlier," the man said, looking at Olu. "Tell me, what do you think about when you see it?" Olu hesitated, his dream feeling too big to say aloud. But something about the man made him feel safe. He took a deep breath and answered, "I want to be a pilot." The man smiled warmly. "A pilot? That's a big dream. How will you make it happen?" Olu looked down, unsure. He didn't know how, but with courage in his heart, he said, "I don't know how, but I'll find a way." The man's face grew serious. Kneeling down, he looked into Olu's eyes. "Dreams only seem impossible if you let them be." The man's words lit a fire inside Olu. As he left, he said, "When you're ready to fly, don't forget to look up." Olu held onto those words like a treasure. From that day on, he worked even harder. He saved every small coin he could, holding onto the hope that one day an opportunity would come. His hands became rough from the hard work, and some days he was so tired he could barely stand. Sometimes, when he lay in bed at night, he wondered if his dream was too big. He thought about how far away the sky seemed, but every time doubt crept in, Olu remembered the stranger's words. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. Olu received a letter. His hand shook as he opened it, and he could hardly believe what he saw. It was a scholarship. Someone had heard about his hard work and determination and wanted to help him go to school. Tears filled Olu's eyes. He ran to his father, holding the letter up. "Papa, I can go to school," he shouted, his voice shaking with joy. "I can finally start my journey to becoming a pilot." His father, who had always been strong and silent, hugged Olu tightly. "I always believed in you," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. "Now go and chase your dream." Olu's hands trembled as he held the scholarship letter. It felt like a dream, a small window into a new world, a world where he could be more than just a poor boy on a farm. He could become a pilot. His heart raced at the thought. But the excitement quickly faded. Olu had never been to school before. He didn't know how to read well and didn't understand half the things his teachers talked about. While the other children answered questions with confidence, Olu sat in the back, feeling like he didn't belong. Every night he stayed up late, trying to learn by the light of a flickering candle, his eyes burning from the strain. Doubt crept in, whispering in his ear, "Maybe you're not good enough. Maybe you're just fooling yourself." One day, after another tough class where he couldn't keep up, Olu collapsed on his bed, his chest heavy with frustration and fear. Tears welled in his eyes, but he held them back. What if he was a failure? What if his dream was too big, too impossible? His father entered the room, his eyes full of concern. He sat next to Olu, saying nothing at first. He simply placed a hand on Olu's shoulder. That small touch made Olu feel a little less alone. "It's hard, isn't it?" his father finally spoke, his voice soft but full of understanding. "But you've never been one to give up." Olu wiped his eyes, his voice breaking. "Papa, what if I can't do it? What if I'm not smart enough?" His father sighed, looking at his son with a mix of pride and sadness. "Dreams are hard to reach, Olu. They feel too big for our hands, but that's why they're dreams. You've already come so far. Don't stop now." The tears Olu had been holding back finally flowed. His father wrapped him in a tight embrace, letting him cry out all the doubt and all the fear that had been building up. In that moment, Olu realized something: he wasn't alone in this fight. His father believed in him, even when Olu couldn't believe in himself. After that night, Olu's struggles didn't disappear, but he faced them with new strength. He couldn't let his doubts win, not now, not when his dream was so close. Years passed, each one filled with struggle and small victories. Olu never became the top of his class, but that didn't matter to him. What mattered was that he never gave up. The more he learned, the closer he felt to his dream. Then one day, the moment he had been waiting for finally arrived: a letter of acceptance to a flight training program. Olu stood frozen, staring at the paper in his hands, his heart pounding. He had made it. After all the pain and all the doubts, he had finally made it. He raced home, bursting through the door. "Papa," he shouted, barely able to contain his excitement. "I'm going to be a pilot. I did it." His father, usually so composed, was speechless. Tears filled his eyes as he embraced his son. "I always knew you could," he whispered. "I'm so proud of you." Flight school was both terrifying and exhilarating. The first time Olu stepped into the cockpit, his hands shook with nerves. But as the plane lifted off the ground, something inside him shifted. For the first time in his life, he felt free. The sky stretched out endlessly before him, full of promise and hope. He was no longer the boy who had looked up at planes with longing. He was now the one flying. After his first solo flight, Olu sat quietly in the cockpit, staring out at the vast sky. His heart was full, not just with pride but with gratitude. He remembered the long days on the farm, the nights spent crying in frustration, and the unwavering support of his father. He thought of how far he had come and how impossible it had once seemed. When your wings are ready, don't forget to look up. The stranger's words echoed in his mind. Olu smiled, knowing that his journey was just beginning. He had conquered the impossible. And now, with the world beneath his wings, he knew nothing could stop him. Never stop dreaming, never stop believing, and never stop working toward what sets your heart on fire.